One hug in the rain changed two lives forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe to Soul Stories, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. We tell the gentle truths the world often forgets. Let's go. Rain poured relentlessly over the cobbled streets of Portland, Oregon, casting a gray veil across the sky. In late October, the autumn air carried the biting chill of the Pacific Northwest, making the bright red maple leaves tremble on their branches. Inside Stumptown Coffee, the soft yellow light spilled out into the storm, mingling with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm waffles. A cozy refuge in the middle of the downpour. Emily Harper, 24, stood behind the counter, a brown apron cinched tightly around her waist, swiftly wiping clean ceramic mugs. Her light brown hair was tied up high, with a few damp strands clinging to her cheeks from the sweat of a long shift. Despite the fatigue in her green eyes, they still shimmered with a gentle warmth, as if she always found something worth treasuring in the smallest things. Emily worked two jobs, serving at Stumptown during the day and cleaning offices at night, to afford rent for a small apartment in East Portland. She loved books, but the old novels on her shelf only had a few pages turned before she'd collapse from exhaustion. Emily's life was far from easy. Orphaned at a young age, she grew up in a children's home on the outskirts of Seattle, where dreams were caged behind gray walls and strict routines. She learned to survive by staying quiet, though her heart always leaned toward others. She once pressed a granola bar into the hands of a hungry child in the park, or spent her last coins to buy coffee for a homeless man outside the shop. For Emily, kindness was the only way to feel enough, even if deep down, she feared she'd never truly belong to anyone. Tonight, her shift ran longer than usual. A group of tourists had lingered until 10, laughing loudly while she cleaned up. By the time she finally locked the shop door, the rain was coming down like it wanted to drown the entire city. She pulled her faded red rain hood over her head, the old jacket barely keeping her warm. Her breath turned to small white clouds in the cold air. She stepped into the alley behind the shop, where dumpsters lined the wet brick walls reeking faintly of mildew. The rain drowned out most sound, but then something made her stop. A muffled sob, barely distinguishable from the water trickling down the gutter, echoed from the shadowed corner of the alley. Emily tilted her head, listening. The crying was soft, but it carried a deep ache, like the ripping open of an old wound. She stood still, her breath sinking with the rhythm of the rain, her heart beating faster. Part of her wanted to keep walking. It was late, she was tired, and this was Portland, where dark corners weren't always safe. But another part of her, the part that always paused for someone else, kept her rooted in place. She slowly moved toward the sound, her rubber boots splashing gently in the puddles. A faint street lamp in the distance cast light over a shadowy figure. A man sat hunched beside a dumpster, head bowed low, hands covering his face. He wore an expensive white dress shirt, now soaked through and stained from the wet ground. His polished leather shoes were caked in mud, and his dark hair hung in wet tangles over his forehead. He was crying, deep, stifled sobs as if he were trying to hide his pain from the world but failing. Emily stood still for a moment, rain soaking through her coat, making her shiver. She didn't know who he was or what had broken a man in such fine clothing so completely, but she understood that feeling, that emptiness, like when she stood alone in her room, thinking about family she never had. 3 years ago, when she first came to Portland, she had once cried alone in a park and no one stopped. Maybe that's why she couldn't walk away now. Without another thought, Emily stepped forward. She knelt beside him, her knees pressing into the icy pavement, rain seeping through her thin jeans. She took off her red coat and gently draped it over his shoulders. He flinched, startled, looking up for a brief second, his eyes red and blurred from tears and rain. His face, though streaked and wet, had the sharp features of someone who once had everything, now reduced to a broken shell. He looked away again, ashamed to be seen like this. But Emily didn't leave. She opened her arms and carefully pulled him into a hug, not tight, just enough for him to feel that she was there. His expensive cologne mixed with the scent of damp earth and rain, forming a strange fragrance she'd never forget. He trembled, his shoulders stiff, then gradually relaxed, his head resting on her shoulder. His sobs quieted, blending into the steady rhythm of the rain. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered, her voice soft but steady, like a promise. "I'm just here." He didn't respond, but she felt his body ease within her embrace. They sat like that, two strangers, nameless, pastless, connected only by shared pain in a dim alley. The rain continued, sharp and cold, but Emily didn't mind. To her, sometimes a hug was enough to say the things words couldn't reach. They stayed there for a while, maybe just a few minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. When his sobbing finally stopped, Emily let go. He didn't look up, just wiped his face with a wet sleeve. She stood, ready to leave. But then her eyes caught a glint on the ground near his feet. A silver ring, tiny and shimmering beneath the street lamp, like a shattered dream. She bent down and picked it up, her cold fingers brushing the cool metal. She didn't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe curiosity. Quietly, she slipped the ring into the pocket of his coat, then turned and walked away without another word. As she stepped toward the back door of the coffee shop, the rain kept falling, like a silent, sorrowful lullaby. She glanced back one last time. The man still sat there, motionless. But the ring was now in his pocket, a mystery she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. She closed the door behind her, returning to the smell of coffee and the soft golden light. But inside her, something lingered, as if that hug hadn't only been for him, but for herself too, a part of her long buried. Emily removed her apron and hung it on the wooden hook by the door, revealing a simple gray sweater underneath. She dried her hands, raindrops sliding down her skin, and let out a deep breath. This wasn't the first time she'd helped a stranger without expecting anything in return. For her, it was the only way to keep her heart beating after all she'd lost. Emily, 24, was a gentle and kind girl, but she bore scars that would never fade. A childhood without a family, nights wondering why she existed. She wasn't searching for love or attention, but she always had open arms for those who needed them. She locked the cafe door and stepped back onto the rain-soaked streets of Portland. She had no idea that hug in a dark alley had changed not just his life, but hers too. The rain fell relentlessly over the dark alley behind Stumptown Coffee in Portland, Oregon, as if trying to drown everything in sorrow. Nathaniel Blake, 29, sat huddled beside a dumpster, his face buried in his hands, stifled sobs blending with the sound of rushing water. His expensive white dress shirt was soaked and caked with mud, his once polished leather shoes now just a soggy mess. He was no longer Nathaniel Blake, the man who once stood at the top of a successful media startup, who once had a small family and warm dinner conversations. Now he was just a shattered soul, nameless, aimless, with no reason left to live. That night, everything inside him broke. Just hours earlier, he had stood in his luxury apartment in downtown Portland, watching his fiancée, Clara, pack her bags. "I can't do this anymore, Nate," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I don't love you. I never truly did." Her words were like knives slicing through his chest. But what hurt more was the truth she confessed afterward. She had been cheating on him for over a year, with his best friend, the man he considered a brother. Nathaniel didn't scream. He didn't argue. He just stood there, numb, watching her pull the suitcase out the door, leaving the engagement ring on the table like some cruel joke. But that wasn't the first time he had lost everything. 6 months earlier, his mother, the only person who had ever truly believed in him, passed away from lung cancer. In her final days, she had held his hand in the hospital and whispered, "You're my light, Nate. Don't ever let it go out." He had promised he would make her proud, but now, sitting in the cold alley, he felt he had broken that promise. No more mother, no more Clara, no more company. He had resigned the week before, unable to bear the pitying looks from colleagues. He had thought about ending it all right there in that alley, where no one knew him. The rain drowned out his thoughts until another sound broke through. The soft steps of someone approaching, light as a melody out of place. Nathaniel didn't lift his head. He just curled up tighter, ashamed to be seen in such a wrecked state. But then a sudden warmth touched him. A coat, worn but warm, draped gently over his shoulders. Startled, he looked up for a brief second and saw her, a girl kneeling beside him, her light brown hair dripping wet beneath a red rain hood, her green eyes glowing with a gentleness he hadn't known in a long time. She asked nothing. She didn't judge. She simply opened her arms and pulled him into an embrace. That hug, gentle yet firm, felt like arms lifting him from the edge of the abyss. Nathaniel trembled, not from the cold, but from the strange feeling that, for the first time in months, someone truly saw him. Not Nathaniel Blake, the ambitious man, but Nate, a broken human being. He buried his head into her shoulder, and the tears came without restraint. The scent of rain, the faint aroma of coffee on her clothes, and the warmth of her hug created a memory he knew would never fade. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered, her voice soft but steady like a vow. "I'm just here." Those simple, honest words pierced the wall he had built around his heart. He didn't answer. He couldn't. But his body relaxed, as if some part of the pain had begun to dissolve. They sat there in the rain, two nameless strangers, bound by a moment he never thought he'd have. When his tears finally stopped, she let go. Nathaniel kept his head down, afraid her eyes might carry pity, but she said nothing more. She stood and he heard her footsteps begin to fade. He thought she had left, but then he felt something slip into the coat pocket over his shoulder. He didn't check. He just sat there, clutching the coat like it was his final shield against the storm. When he finally stood, the alley remained dark, but something had shifted. He reached into the coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of tissue, soaked but still legible. In neat handwriting it read, "You matter, don't give up." Those words, simple but powerful, sparked something inside him, a tiny flame flickering in his chest. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know why she had stopped in that alley. But her hug and that scrap of tissue had done what no one else could. They had given him a reason to keep going. Nathaniel left the alley, his steps heavy, but carrying a new purpose. He didn't go back to the coffee shop. He didn't try to find the girl in the red raincoat. He was afraid that if he saw her again, the light would vanish, as if it had only been a dream. Instead, he got in his car and drove out of Portland that very night, carrying the red coat and the tissue note like treasures. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay where everything had fallen apart. In the days that followed, Nathaniel found his way to Seattle, where he started from scratch. He worked freelance, wrote articles for small newspapers, lived in a rundown apartment, but the emptiness was gone. Whenever he felt like giving up, he opened the tissue, now carefully pressed between pages of a notebook, and read again, "You matter, don't give up." Those words became his compass. He learned to rise again, not to prove anything to Clara or to the world, but to keep the promise he made to himself and to the girl who saved him. The red coat hung in his closet, never washed, a quiet reminder of that rainy night. Nathaniel never learned her name, but in his heart, she was the light that pulled him from the dark. He swore that one day, if fate allowed, he would find her again, not to repay a debt, but to tell her that she had changed his life forever. Autumn in Portland, Oregon, still carried that familiar chill, with light drizzles casting a silvery veil over the city. Fiery red maple leaves rustled across the sidewalks, adding color to the stone-paved streets glistening under streetlights. Inside Powell's City of Books, the largest bookstore in the cultural heart of Portland, warm golden light radiated from the towering shelves, blending with the scent of old paper and freshly brewed coffee. This was a place where stories, old and new, always found a home. Emily Harper, now 31, stood behind the oak counter, a forest green sweater hugging her slender frame. Her light brown hair was loosely tied back, soft curls falling over her cheeks, and her green eyes still held that gentle spark, as if she could always find something good in others. 7 years had passed since that rainy night, when she had embraced a stranger in the alley behind Stumptown Coffee. She was no longer the 24-year-old juggling 2 jobs just to survive. Now Emily managed a cozy section of Powell's, overseeing the rare books department and organizing community events, from kids' book clubs to poetry readings for the unhoused. Emily didn't live a wealthy life. She still rented a small apartment in East Portland, where thin walls echoed the nightly rhythm of falling rain. Her salary covered the basics, a few old books, and occasionally a warm meal for someone in need. But to Emily, wealth wasn't measured in dollars. It was in the smiles she brought to others. She had helped an elderly woman track down a beloved childhood book and spent lunch breaks teaching a homeless child how to read. Books aren't just word, she often told customers. They're doors to somewhere better. Though kind-hearted, Emily still carried an old scar, the lingering feeling of not being enough, born from an orphaned childhood. Growing up in a group home in Seattle, she had learned to mask sadness behind a smile. Yet sometimes on rainy nights, she still wondered if she truly belonged anywhere. The hug in that alley 7 years ago, though faded in memory, had left a trace of something elusive, like she had touched something greater, but never knew its name. Today, the bookstore was livelier than usual. A group of school children gathered in the children's corner, giggling as Emily read aloud from Charlotte's Web. When she finished and began straightening the shelves, the doorbell chimed softly. A man walked in, bringing with him the scent of rain and a quiet presence that couldn't be ignored. He wore a tailored gray wool coat, his dark hair neatly combed, and his deep brown eyes carried a steady light that was hard to read. He was tall, moved with quiet confidence, as if he belonged to another world, but had chosen to step into the humble warmth of Powell's. Emily glanced at him from across the store, sensing something oddly familiar, but dismissed the thought. She returned to shelving old paperbacks until he approached the counter, speaking in a low, calm voice. "Hello, I'm looking to buy some books. One's about faith and hope, preferably old editions." Emily looked up, slightly surprised. The request itself wasn't unusual, but the way he said it, slow, deliberate, as if every word mattered, caught her attention. "Books on faith and hope? We've got a few good ones in the rare section. Are you thinking fiction, philosophy, or poetry?" He smiled, a reserved but warm expression. "I'll let you decide. I'd like the whole shelf if possible." Emily blinked, unsure if she heard right. "The whole shelf? You mean all of it?" "Yes," he said calmly. "I'm building a small library, and I trust you'll know which books are worth keeping." She stood still for a moment, her heart unexpectedly quickening. Not because of the money, though such an order would certainly help the store, but because of the way he looked at her, as if he wasn't just seeing an employee, but something deeper. She nodded, masking her sudden fluster. "All right, I'll pick out the best ones. Would you like them delivered, or will you be picking them up?" "I'll come back," he said, pulling a business card from his coat and placing it on the counter. "Just contact me when they're ready." Emily picked up the card. It had only a name, Nathaniel B., and a phone number. No logo, no title. Just simple, like an open-ended invitation. She slipped it into her pocket and turned back to work, but her thoughts began to drift elsewhere. "Faith and hope," she murmured, stepping toward the rare book section. She selected titles like The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and a worn poetry collection by Mary Oliver, books that had once comforted her in her darkest moments. As she pulled another book from the shelf, a memory flickered, of a rainy night, a dark alley, and a silver ring glinting on the ground. She paused, her finger tracing the edge of the worn spine, a chill running down her back. She had nearly forgotten that night, but the man's request for faith and hope stirred something deep. She shook her head, telling herself it was just a coincidence. But when she glanced out the window and saw the rain shimmering under the streetlight, she couldn't shake the feeling that the hug from all those years ago was quietly making its way back to her. Rain drizzled outside the windows of Powell's City of Books, casting a delicate fog over Portland, as if the city were whispering its own secrets. Inside, warm golden light illuminated the towering wooden shelves, where thousands of well-worn books told stories of hope, loss, and love. The scent of old paper mingled with freshly brewed coffee from the small cafe corner, creating a space that made anyone who stepped in feel instantly at home. Emily Harper, 31, stood behind the oak counter, gently organizing a stack of rare books she had curated for last week's special order. Her forest green sweater hugged her slender frame, and her loosely tied light brown hair let a few soft curls fall against her cheeks. Her green eyes, tired from long shifts, still held that quiet kindness as she chatted with customers. Today she was busier than usual, preparing for the upcoming community reading event, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the business card in her pocket, Nathaniel B., the mysterious man who had requested an entire shelf of books about faith and hope. She didn't quite understand why the order left her feeling so unsettled. Maybe it was his eyes, deep and warm, as if he knew something about her that even she didn't. She shook her head, brushing off the thought, and continued jotting notes for the selected titles. The Alchemist, Man's Search for Meaning, and an old poetry volume by Mary Oliver. But then, the bell above the door chimed softly, pulling her out of her reverie. A man stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of rain and a calm that felt almost too steady. Nathaniel Blake, now 36, was a completely different man from the broken soul in the alley 7 years ago. He wore a tailored gray wool coat, a crisp white shirt, and spotless leather shoes. His dark hair was neatly combed, but his deep brown eyes still carried a quiet sadness, tucked behind a soft, practiced smile. He approached the counter, his stride confident but not boastful, like someone used to standing out, but choosing not to. Emily looked up, her heart skipping a beat. It was him, the customer from last week. She smiled out of habit, though something stirred inside her. "Hello," she said evenly. "Your books are ready. I've selected about 30, just as you asked." Nathaniel nodded, his subtle smile lighting up his face. "Thank you. I trust you picked some wonderful ones." His voice was deep and warm, each word carefully chosen. He stood there with his hands tucked into his coat pockets, his gaze drifting across her, not with curiosity, but like he was searching for something he'd once known. Emily retrieved the stack of books from behind the counter, setting them down with a soft thud. She pointed to each one, offering brief explanations. "This is The Alchemist, about chasing dreams. And this one, Man's Search for Meaning, is about finding purpose through suffering. And this poetry collection, it feels like a hug made of words." She paused, realizing she had said too much, and flushed. "Sorry, I got a little carried away." "It's okay," Nathaniel replied, his eyes gentler now. "I like hearing you talk about books. You make them come alive." He tilted his head slightly, as if memorizing her voice and every small gesture. Emily felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. She slid the stack toward him, trying to steady her voice. "Would you like to review them before I pack them? Or I can have them delivered if you prefer." "I'll take them myself," he said, then stepped toward a nearby shelf, as if he wasn't ready to leave yet. His hand skimmed along the spines until he paused at a worn copy of Walden. "Have you read this one?" he asked, glancing back at her. "Yes," Emily replied, stepping out from behind the counter to stand closer. "Thoreau makes me think about slowing down, finding meaning in simple things. Do you like it?" Nathaniel smiled, more openly this time, as if she had touched something private within him. "I like the idea that sometimes a single quiet moment can change everything." He flipped through a few pages, then placed it on the counter. "I'll take this one too." Emily nodded, sensing that he wasn't just talking about the book. There was something in his eyes, in the space he kept between them, close enough to feel familiar, but distant enough to stay guarded. She wrapped up Walden, her hands slightly trembling, without knowing why. "Thank you for choosing Powell's," she said, handing him the paper bag. Nathaniel took the bag, and for a brief moment, his fingers brushed against hers. Emily felt a strange warmth, a flicker of recognition, like she had touched him once before. He looked at her a beat longer than most would, his eyes as if trying to say something. But then he simply nodded. "You exceeded my expectations, Emily." She blinked, surprised he knew her name, until she remembered the name tag on her sweater. "Oh, thank you," she said, offering a polite smile. "I hope you enjoy the books." "I will," he replied, his voice lower now, nearly a whisper. He turned to leave, but just before he reached the door, he paused. He pulled a small piece of paper from his coat pocket and slipped it into the bag sitting on the counter. "This is to thank you," he said, then stepped out, leaving only the soft jingle of the bell and a weightless, lingering feeling in Emily's chest. She stood there for a long moment, watching his figure disappear through the glass, where the rain still shimmered beneath the streetlight. She didn't understand why her heart was racing, why his voice stirred a hazy memory. She shook her head, told herself she was imagining things, and turned back to the counter. But as she tidied up, she noticed the paper he'd left inside the book bag. Emily opened it, and her heart stopped when she read the handwritten line. Some hugs save lives, mine was saved by yours. Those words, simple but powerful, flashed like lightning through the fog of her memory. She clutched the note, breath catching in her chest. That rainy night 7 years ago came rushing back. The dark alley, the crying man, the hug she thought had been forgotten. Could it be he was that man? She looked out the window again, but Nathaniel was gone, vanished into the Portland rain. The paper trembled in her hand, and for the first time in years, Emily felt a door within her creak open, leading her toward a truth she hadn't been ready to face. Rain continued to fall gently outside the windows of Powell's City of Books, casting a soft mist over Portland as if the city itself were cradling its secrets in a tender embrace. Inside, the warm golden light illuminated the tall wooden shelves where worn pages whispered stories of hope and healing. Emily Harper, 31, stood behind the oak counter, holding the small piece of paper the mysterious customer had left the week before. The handwritten line, "Some hugs save lives, mine was saved by yours," still made her heart race every time she read it. She couldn't shake the memory of that rainy night 7 years ago, when she had embraced a stranger in the alley behind Stumptown Coffee. Could he really be that man? Emily tried to stay focused, stacking books for an upcoming community reading event, but her thoughts kept circling back to the man who called himself Nathaniel B. Her green sweater rose and fell with each breath, and her green eyes held a flicker of worry. She had checked the business card he left, just a name and a phone number, no other clues. But something in his eyes, in the way he spoke about books, made her feel he wasn't just a typical customer. Today, the bookstore buzzed with excitement. A message from management had the whole team talking. Powell's had just received a major donation, enough to renovate the rare book section, add seating, and expand community events. Her coworkers whispered excitedly about new bookshelves and a modern espresso machine. But when she asked who the donor was, the manager just shrugged. "A private benefactor," they said. "They want to stay anonymous." Emily nodded, but a strange intuition stirred inside her. She returned to the counter, pulled out her phone, and searched the name from the card. Nathaniel B. The Google results appeared instantly, and her phone nearly slipped from her hand. Nathaniel Blake, 36, CEO of Horizon Media, a major communications company headquartered in Seattle. Article after article praised him as a startup genius, someone who had built an empire from the ground up after a mysterious and difficult period in his life. A photo showed him in a gray suit, dark eyes calm and deep, and a quiet smile on his face. It was him, the same man who had stood at her counter the week before. She dropped into her seat, breath shallow. Nathaniel Blake, a millionaire CEO. The man who bought an entire shelf of rare books? The one who wrote that message about a life-saving hug? She scrolled through the articles searching for traces of his past, but found only carefully guarded statements. A man known for his privacy. Clutching the note in her hand, her heart thundered. If he really was that man from the alley, why had he come back? And why hadn't he told her? Before she could answer her own questions, the bell above the door chimed softly. Nathaniel stepped inside, carrying the scent of rain and his usual composed calm. Today he wore a deep navy wool coat, his white shirt slightly unbuttoned, making him look more relaxed but no less polished. He walked to the counter with a gentle smile. "Hello, Emily," he said. "I thought I'd stop by and see what's new." Emily blinked, trying to stay composed though her heart was pounding. "Hi, Nathaniel," she said, her voice slightly shaky. She studied his face, searching for confirmation of what she already knew. The store just received a large donation. The rare books section is being upgraded. Do you know anything about that? Nathaniel tilted his head, a playful glint in his eye, but he didn't answer immediately. "I heard. That's wonderful news for the bookstore, isn't it?" He walked to a nearby shelf, letting his fingers trail along the spines as if trying to stretch out the moment. "What book would you choose for me today?" Emily took a deep breath, deciding it was time to confront the truth. She stepped out from behind the counter, holding a copy of Hope is the Thing with Feathers by Emily Dickinson. "This one," she said, handing it to him. "It's about hope, just like the books you asked for. But I need to ask you something. She paused, gripping the book tightly. The note you left last week, about the hug, was it real? Was it you? Were you the man in the alley? The air seemed to grow heavier, the only sound the soft drizzle beyond the glass. Nathaniel looked at her, his deep brown eyes revealing a world she hadn't seen before. He didn't flinch, just nodded slowly. Yes, it was me. Emily's head spun. She took a step back, hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to hold her heart together. But why? Why didn't you tell me? And the donation? That was you, wasn't it? Her voice trembled, a mix of confusion and emotion flooding through her. Nathaniel stepped closer, but stopped just short, leaving her space to breathe. His voice was low and steady, like a confession that had waited too long. I wouldn't be standing here if a girl in a red raincoat hadn't saved me that night, Emily. 7 years ago, I'd lost everything. The woman I loved, my family, my will to live. I sat in that alley ready to give up. But you came. You didn't ask questions. You didn't judge. You just held me and told me I mattered. That hug and the note you left gave me a reason to stand up again. Emily stood frozen, tears pooling in her eyes. She remembered that night, the crying man, the silver ring, and the strange certainty that she had done something right. But she had never imagined it meant this much. I just wanted to help, she whispered. I didn't know it would mean that much. To me, it meant everything, Nathaniel said, gratitude shining in his eyes. I left Portland after that night and rebuilt my life, but I never forgot you. When I finally had the strength to return, I wanted to do something for you, just like you did for me. The donation is just the beginning. Emily shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. But I'm not special. I'm just a bookseller. I'm not someone who... She looked down, the old feeling of never being enough rising from her orphan childhood. Nathaniel took one step closer, his voice gentle but firm. You are the most remarkable person I've ever met, Emily. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. The kind of person who hugs a stranger in the rain, expecting nothing in return. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a weathered piece of tissue, carefully preserved. You wrote this. It saved me. Now I want you to know. You deserve every good thing that comes your way. Emily took the tissue, instantly recognizing her own handwriting. You matter. Don't give up. She burst into tears, not from sadness, but because, for the first time, she felt seen, truly seen. Nathaniel stood quietly, not pushing her to say anything, just offering her a soft smile before turning away. I'll come back, he said, then stepped out the door, leaving Emily with the note, and a heart beginning to open, piece by piece. A light drizzle fell on the cobblestone streets of Portland, Oregon, casting a delicate veil over the city, like it was trying to soothe old wounds. Inside Powell's City of Books, the warm golden glow bathed the towering wooden shelves, where the scent of old pages and freshly brewed coffee wrapped around the space like a gentle embrace for wandering souls. Emily Harper, 31, stood behind the oak counter, softly arranging a stack of rare books. Her forest green sweater hugged her slender frame, and though her green eyes still bore traces of exhaustion, there was a new flicker of hope. Something she hadn't felt until Nathaniel Blake walked into her life. 7 years after that rainy night in the alley, Emily never imagined that the man she once held would now stand before her, not as a shattered stranger, but as a composed CEO with a grateful heart. Since Nathaniel had revealed his identity and the story behind that life-saving hug, he had become a regular presence in her days. He visited Powell's a few times a week, sometimes to check on his book orders, other times just to talk. Their conversations began with literature but slowly deepened, like two old friends reconnecting after waking from the same long dream. Today, the bookstore was quieter than usual, with only a few customers flipping through pages in distant corners. Nathaniel walked in, bringing with him the scent of rain and his familiar, reserved smile. He wore a deep navy wool coat, his white shirt casually unbuttoned at the collar, giving him a softer, more approachable air. "Hello, Emily," he greeted, his voice low and warm. Found anything good for me today? Emily smiled, the familiarity easing the weight in her chest. I did, she replied, pulling a copy of The Road Less Traveled from the shelf. This one's about choosing the harder path, the one that's worth it. I think you'll like it. Nathaniel took the book, his fingers brushing its worn cover, though his eyes never left her. You always get it right, he said, settling into the wooden chair near the counter like he intended to linger. Have you ever thought about taking a different path? Somewhere other than Portland? Other than this bookstore? The question made Emily pause. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the rain shimmered beneath the lamplight. I have, she said softly. When I was little, I dreamed of becoming a publisher, of bringing books to places no one was reading. But life doesn't make that easy. I grew up in a group home in Seattle. No family, no one ever told me I could be anything. I always felt like I wasn't enough. She stopped, surprised she had said it aloud. Nathaniel looked at her, his deep brown eyes filled with understanding. I know what that feels like, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My mom was the only one who believed I could do anything. When she died of cancer, I lost my light, and my fiancée, she betrayed me with my best friend. I thought I had nothing left to live for. That night in the alley, I was ready to give up. Emily held her breath, her chest aching at his words. She remembered the man crying in the rain, but hadn't known he had been so close to the edge. I didn't know, she whispered. I just wanted to help. And you did, Nathaniel replied, his eyes glowing with gratitude. You didn't just hug me, Emily. You gave me hope when I thought it had died. The air between them grew heavy, not with sadness, but with the weight of honesty pulling them closer. Emily sat in the chair across from him, for the first time without the counter as a barrier. I'm not great at talking about myself, she admitted, voice trembling. In the group home, I learned to stay quiet, because if I spoke, people would see how weak I was. I always thought that if I was good enough, someone would want me, but no one ever came. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes soft but steady. You are enough, Emily, more than enough. You're the one who saved me, not with words, but with your heart. His words felt like a warm breeze melting away layers of ice inside her. She smiled faintly, tears brimming, though she held them back. They sat together in the quiet bookstore, sharing scars they had never shown anyone. Outside, the rain played its gentle rhythm, like a soundtrack to a sacred moment. As the lights dimmed, signaling closing time, Nathaniel stood, but he didn't leave right away. He stepped closer to Emily, closer than he ever had, and in a moment neither of them expected, he leaned in, his lips brushing hers softly. The kiss was tender, like a promise. It tasted of coffee and rain and something fragile yet real. Emily froze, stunned, but then she returned the kiss, her heart pounding like it might break free from her chest. But then, like a wave crashing over still water, fear surged. She pulled back suddenly, hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide and panicked. No, we can't, she whispered, voice shaking. You're too good to me, Nathaniel. I'm not enough. Nathaniel blinked, pain flickering across his face, but no anger. Emily, you don't have to be enough. I just want you to see what I see. A remarkable woman, worthy of love. But Emily shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. You don't understand. You're a CEO. You have the world. And me, I'm just a bookstore clerk. I'm not special. I can't be the one who lets you down. She turned away, hugging herself, trying to hide the old ache rising inside her. Nathaniel stood still, wanting to reach out, but he didn't. He respected the space she needed. You could never let me down, he said quietly, but I won't push. When you're ready, I'll be here. He took The Road Less Traveled from the counter and placed a folded note beside it, his quiet ritual. Then he walked to the door, leaving behind the soft jingle of the bell and an Emily tangled in her own heart. She sat down, opened the note, and read the familiar words. You are enough, always. Her tears fell freely now, but this time she wasn't sure if they were from fear or from the light of a new hope breaking through. Winter arrived early in Portland, Oregon, bringing icy winds that swept through cobblestone streets, shaking the last red maple leaves from their branches. Inside Powell's city of books, the golden lights glowed steadily, casting a gentle warmth over the towering shelves. Emily Harper, 31, stood behind the oak counter, carefully organizing a stack of new arrivals. Her red sweater, a Christmas gift from a coworker, hugged her slender frame, but her green eyes held a weariness, as if part of her soul had gone missing. It had been 3 weeks since Nathaniel Blake walked out of the bookstore, leaving behind the note, "You are enough, always." Since the kiss, soft and honest, in her tearful retreat, he hadn't returned, hadn't called, hadn't left a trace. His absence was a hollow space Emily hadn't anticipated. She had told him he was too good, that she wasn't enough. But now, with him truly gone, she felt the ache of having lost something precious before she had even learned how to hold it. Still, Emily didn't let herself spiral. She had grown up in a group home where pain had to be tucked away neatly. She had learned to be strong, even when her heart bled in silence. She threw herself into her work, organizing a story hour for homeless children, choosing books like The Giving Tree to teach them about kindness. She smiled at customers, helped an elderly man find the book he gave his wife on their wedding day, and spent her lunch breaks making sandwiches for a trembling woman outside the store. But each time the doorbell chimed its soft ring, her eyes instinctively glanced up, hoping to see the tall figure in the navy wool coat. And each time it wasn't him, she reminded herself not to hope. At night, in her small East Portland apartment, Emily sat by the window, watching the rain shimmer beneath the streetlight. She unfolded the old tissue Nathaniel had once given her. "You matter. Don't give up." And reread it, her fingers brushing the faded ink. She remembered his kiss, tender and sincere, and his words telling her she was enough. But the fear of not being enough, seated deep in her orphan childhood, still clung to her like a shadow. "Did I do the right thing?" she whispered. Only the rain answered. Meanwhile, Nathaniel hadn't truly disappeared. In Seattle, he buried himself in work at Horizon Media. But his thoughts always drifted back to Emily. He respected her choice, knowing she needed time to confront her fear. But he couldn't stand still. He remembered her story, her dream of becoming a publisher, tucked away because of poverty and missed opportunity. He didn't want to help her to repay a debt. He wanted to help because he believed she deserved to live that dream. Quietly, Nathaniel reached out to a prestigious university in Portland and arranged a special scholarship in her name, the Hope Scholarship, designed just for her. He worked with a legal team to finalize everything, anonymously. He knew she'd reject it if she learned it came from him. One icy morning, when Emily arrived at Powell's, she found a thick envelope on the counter, addressed to her in formal print. She opened it, her heart thudding, and read the letter from a law office in Seattle. Its message was short but life-altering. "Miss Emily Harper, we are pleased to inform you that you have been awarded the Hope Scholarship to pursue a master's in publishing management at the University of Portland. This scholarship includes full tuition, living expenses, and a research stipend. Someone believes in you more than you realize." Emily collapsed into the chair behind the counter, hands trembling around the letter. She read it again and again. A master's in publishing. Her dream, buried since she'd aged out of the system and taken jobs just to survive. She had shared it with Nathaniel once, in a quiet moment between the shelves, but she had never imagined he'd remember, and even less that he would act on it, because only he, the man who knew her past and had once called her enough, could be behind such a gift. She grabbed her phone and searched for any mention of the Hope Scholarship. All she found was a vague description, "For those who give hope to others." She thought of Nathaniel, his note, the hug in the alley 7 years ago. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from grief, but from the strange, overwhelming feeling of finally being seen, of being believed in. But with the joy came fear. Accepting the scholarship meant stepping into a new world, where she would have to face herself fully. Could she handle it? Emily stood, wiped her tears, and returned to her work. But the letter remained on the counter, a quiet invitation she couldn't ignore. She began reading books on publishing, jotting ideas in a notebook. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream again. She organized a poetry reading at Powell's, choosing verses about courage. And as she stood before the small crowd, reading aloud, she felt a part of herself coming back to life. Not the orphan, not the bookstore clerk, but a woman who could shape something beautiful from her pain. That night in her apartment, Emily sat down and wrote a letter of thanks to the law firm, even if she knew it might never reach Nathaniel. "Thank you for believing in me," she wrote. "I'll try not to let them down." She folded the letter and placed it beside the old tissue Nathaniel had once carried in his coat. Then she looked out into the rain. She didn't know where he was, but she felt him close, like a street lamp glowing through the mist, guiding her gently back to who she was meant to be. Rain fell steadily over the cobbled streets of Portland, Oregon, cloaking the city in a shimmering silver veil, as if retelling old stories beneath the streetlights. It was mid-December, and winter had arrived with a biting chill, sending the last maple leaves fluttering quietly to the sidewalk. In front of Powell's City of Books, warm golden light spilled from freshly cleaned windows, illuminating a newly upgraded bookstore, where the rare book section gleamed and the cafe corner smelled of roasted beans and comfort. Emily Harper stood beneath the awning, a weathered book in her arms, her eyes following the raindrops like they carried memories. Her red sweater, a Christmas gift from her co-workers, rose and fell with her breath, and her light brown hair was damp from the mist. 7 years ago, on a night just like this, she had wrapped a red coat around a crying stranger in an alley behind Stumptown Coffee, never knowing that one act of kindness would change both of their lives. Now Powell's was more than a job. It was her haven, the place where she found joy in connecting people through stories. The Hope Scholarship she received weeks earlier, a secret gift from Nathaniel Blake, had cracked open a new door, allowing her to dream again of becoming a publisher. But even as her heart slowly healed, a part of her remained empty, the part where Nathaniel used to stand before disappearing again. 3 weeks had passed. No visits, no calls, no notes. Since that gentle kiss and her tearful retreat, Emily feared she had pushed him away for good. But the letter from the law firm, with its quiet line, "Someone believes in you more than you know," still sat on her desk, next to the old tissue that read, "You matter. Don't give up." Those words haunted her, filled her thoughts with his deep brown eyes, his quiet smile that made her chest flutter. She told herself to be strong, but on nights like this, she found herself under this awning, listening for the doorbell chime, hoping for a silhouette she missed too much to admit. The shop was closed, but Emily had stayed late to check the new shelving. She ran her hand along the polished spines of old books, inhaling the scent of aged paper, feeling warmth stir in her chest. Powell's was more beautiful than ever. New wooden chairs, soft lighting, and a children's reading corner she had proposed, now real and inviting. She knew Nathaniel had funded it all, though he never admitted it. She wanted to thank him, to say she was trying to become the best version of herself. But where was he? She stepped outside, letting the rain kiss her cheeks. The bookstore's golden glow spilled across the sidewalk, a mirror of the night she had once wrapped a red raincoat around a stranger. She closed her eyes and let the memory wash over her. The choked sobs, the warmth of the hug, the glint of a silver ring. She opened her eyes, and her heart stopped. A tall figure stepped through the rain, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers, purple and white, and a brand new red raincoat glowing beneath the streetlight. Nathaniel Blake stopped in front of her, his dark hair wet, but his brown eyes steady, sincere. He wore a deep navy coat, white shirt slightly open at the collar, elegant but familiar. "Hello, Emily," he said, his voice a warm melody from another lifetime. "I promised I'd come back." Emily blinked, gripping the book in her arms like a shield. "Nathaniel," she whispered, voice trembling. "Where did you go? I thought you weren't coming back." He stepped closer, holding the red raincoat over her to shield her from the rain. "I needed time to do something for you," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I never wanted to leave. I just wanted you to have the space to find yourself again." He handed her the bouquet, delicate petals trembling in the wind. "These grow just outside Portland. They're not perfect, but they're resilient. Like you." Emily took the flowers, her fingers shaking as they brushed the soft blooms. Their scent mixed with rain and memory, stirring something tender inside her. Thank you, she whispered, tears threatening. But why all of this? The scholarship? The bookstore? I don't know how to respond. Nathaniel smiled, a smile that softened his whole face. This time, let me be the warmth, he said, his voice quiet but sure. He draped the red raincoat over her shoulders, the same way she once had for him 7 years ago. You saved me, Emily, not just with a hug, but by reminding me that kindness still exists. Now I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you matter. She stood frozen, her heart thundering. Then Nathaniel slowly knelt, right there beneath the golden light and soft rain, just outside Powell's. From his coat pocket, he pulled a simple silver ring. No diamonds, nothing flashy, just a circle of truth, gleaming with meaning. Emily Harper, he said, his eyes locked with hers. You are my light. You're the reason I'm here. I can't promise you the world, but I can promise love, respect, and to walk beside you on every road ahead. Will you marry me? Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks, but this time, they weren't from fear. They were from a joy she had never known. She looked at him, the man who had once been a stranger in the dark, and now saw someone who understood her more than anyone ever had. The fear of not being enough still lingered in a far corner of her heart, but it no longer held power. She nodded, voice breaking. Yes, I'll marry you. Nathaniel stood, gently slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into an embrace, deeper, warmer than the one from years ago. The rain still fell, but under the old golden light of Powell's, they stood in a world of their own. A world of love, of healing, of second chances. Emily rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, and knew she hadn't just found love. She had finally come home to herself. Were you satisfied with the most recent story you heard on Soul Stories? Leave a comment saying, I'm happy if you were. Spring arrived in Portland, Oregon on a whisper. Soft winds and gentle sunlight melting away winter's chill. Cobblestone streets glistened under the warming sky, and cherry blossoms bloomed across the city, their pink petals scattering beauty along the sidewalks. Inside Powell's City of Books, a different kind of warmth filled the air. The rare book section was adorned with delicate wildflowers in shades of purple and white, string lights twinkling like stars above a small aisle that led to the back corner of the store, where a simple but sacred wedding was about to take place. Emily Harper stood in front of the mirror in the staff lounge, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the waist of her plain white dress. It wasn't grand, just soft cotton with long sleeves, but it wrapped around her like a gentle hug. Her light brown hair hung loose, crowned by a wreath of wildflowers, and her green eyes shimmered with a joy she had never known before. Today she was marrying Nathaniel Blake, the man who had once been a stranger in a rainy alley, now the light that had led her into a life she'd never dared to dream of. 7 years ago, her embrace had saved him in that dark alley behind Stumptown Coffee. Today Nathaniel stood at the far end of Powell's, dressed in a deep blue suit with no tie, his dark hair neatly combed, but still effortlessly natural. He hadn't wanted a lavish hotel ceremony. He wanted to marry her here, at Powell's, where he had found her again, where she had turned books into hope for everyone around her. Guests began arriving, familiar faces, unexpected ones. Emily stepped out, heart pounding, as a small crowd gathered among the shelves. There were no hundreds of guests, no orchestra, just around 30 souls, co-workers, close friends, and faces she never thought she'd see again. There was Martha, the homeless woman Emily had once given a sandwich to outside the shop, now wearing a clean coat and smiling radiantly. Tommy, the boy she had taught to read in the park 7 years ago, now a tall teenager holding Charlotte's Web as a wedding gift. And Mr. Henry, the elderly man she'd helped find the book he'd given his late wife on their anniversary, sitting in the front row with misty eyes. She froze mid-step, clutching her bouquet of purple and white wildflowers, the same kind Nathaniel had given her on the night he proposed. How are they here? She whispered, turning to Nathaniel, waiting at the end of the aisle. He smiled softly. I found them, he said. You changed their lives, Emily. Just like you changed mine. They wanted to be here, to thank you. Tears stung her eyes, but she held them back as she walked slowly down the flower-strewn aisle. A co-worker, Sarah, played a gentle violin melody, amazing grace, filling the bookstore with a sacred hush. When Emily reached him, Nathaniel took her hand, his fingers warm and steady. "You look even more beautiful than I ever imagined," he whispered. She blushed, heart thudding. The officiant, an old friend of Nathaniel's, began the ceremony with simple words. "We are here not just to witness the love between Emily and Nathaniel, but to honor the kindness that brought them together." A single hug in the rain changed everything. Nathaniel turned to Emily, love and gratitude glowing in his eyes. His vows were deep and quiet, but unwavering. "Emily, you are the light that guided me out of the darkness. I promise to love you, protect you, and remind you every day that you are enough, more than enough. To me, you are the world." Emily took a deep breath, her tears now spilling freely, but her smile held firm. "Nathaniel, you showed me I could dream, love, and be fully myself. I promise to walk beside you through every joy and every sorrow, just like I did with our very first hug." Her voice trembled, but her words carried the strength of every wound that had healed. They exchanged rings, simple silver bands, Nathaniel's engraved with the words, "You matter." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel pulled her into his arms and kissed her, soft and slow, but soul deep. Applause broke out and laughter followed. Emily leaned into him, feeling his warmth, and knew she was no longer alone. After the ceremony, everyone gathered around the wooden tables of the bookstore, where sandwiches from Stumptown and homemade pastries had been laid out. Martha approached her first, taking her hand. "You gave me a sandwich when I was starving," she said, voice thick with emotion. "But more than that, you made me feel human again. Thank you." Then Tommy stepped forward, grinning as he handed her the book. "You taught me to read this," he said proudly. "Now I want to be a writer. Because of you." Mr. Henry stood and raised his coffee cup. "Emily brought warmth to all of us," he said, his voice echoing among the shelves. "And now she deserves the world." A chorus followed. "She deserves the world." The applause swelled again, and this time Emily cried freely, not from sadness but from belonging. For the first time she felt what it meant to have a family, not by blood, but by grace. Nathaniel stood by her side, one arm around her waist, his eyes glowing with quiet pride. "See," he whispered, "you didn't just save me, Emily. You're the light in all of their lives, too." Emily looked around at the smiling faces, the books on the shelves, the soft golden lights, and she understood something deep in her bones. She reached for Nathaniel's hand, feeling the cool silver ring against her skin, and knew she had not only found love, she had found purpose. She was no longer the girl from the rain-soaked alley. She was the one who brought the light. Spring lit up Portland, Oregon, with gentle sunlight and soft breezes, warming the cobblestone streets and painting the city in shades of pink as cherry blossoms bloomed overhead. In a small community hall near the city center, golden lights glowed above rows of wooden chairs, where hundreds of guests gathered, buzzing with laughter, whispered conversations, and the aroma of fresh coffee from a stand sponsored by Stumptown Coffee. Backstage, Emily Harper clutched a copy of her newly released book. Her simple forest green dress hugged her slender frame, and her loose light brown hair curled naturally at the ends. Her green eyes sparkled with confidence, though a hint of nervous energy lingered. 3 years earlier, she had stood in Powell's City of Books, vowing her life to Nathaniel Blake in a quiet, sacred ceremony. Now she was an author, a speaker, and the founder of a nonprofit helping homeless women reclaim their lives, a beacon for those who had once been lost, like she once was. Her book, The Hug That Saved Two Lives, told the story of her and Nathaniel, from a rainy alleyway and a stranger's pain, through heartbreak and healing, to a love and shared mission that transformed their world. Writing it hadn't been easy. Emily had spent countless nights in their small apartment, typing line by line, confronting orphaned memories and the echo of never feeling enough. But Nathaniel had always been there, bringing her coffee, reading drafts, reminding her that their story deserved to be told. When the book was published by a local press, thanks in part to the publishing degree she completed through her scholarship, it quickly resonated with readers. It became a symbol of kindness, second chances, and hope. Emily took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. Applause erupted and she smiled, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. There was Martha, the once homeless woman Emily had fed outside Powell's, now working as a seamstress through Emily's program. Tommy, the boy she once taught to read, now a literature major, held Charlotte's Web proudly in his lap. And Sarah, her Powell's co-worker who had played the violin at her wedding, beamed from the front row. But Emily's eyes paused when they found him. Nathaniel Blake, standing quietly near the back in a navy sweater, his deep brown eyes filled with unchanging love. He didn't need a spotlight. He just needed her to know he was there, like he had promised on their wedding day. "Thank you all for being here," Emily began, her voice warm but steady. "This book isn't just about me and Nathaniel. It's about all of us. The times we chose to stop, to reach out, and bring light to someone else's world." She shared the story of that rainy night in the alley, of how a simple hug, what she thought was a fleeting gesture, had led her to a life she never dared to imagine. "Kindness doesn't have to be grand," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "Sometimes just a hug is enough to change everything." The room fell quiet, then erupted into applause. Many wiped away tears. Martha stood, her voice trembling. "Emily didn't just feed me. She gave me hope. Now I have a new life." Tommy raised his copy of the book, grinning. "She taught me that books can save people. I'm here because of her." The applause swelled again, and Emily bowed her head, tears sliding down her cheeks, this time not from pain, but from the overwhelming sense of belonging. After the launch, she signed books, embraced old friends, and greeted the people who had walked with her through every season. From across the room, she caught sight of Nathaniel speaking with Sarah, but his eyes never left hers. He didn't need a stage. He was the steady light behind it all. She walked to him, gently taking his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Nathaniel smiled, pulling her into his arms. "You're the one who started it all, Emily," he murmured. "I just followed your light." He kissed her forehead, and in that moment, surrounded by soft laughter and warm lights, they returned to the alley in spirit, to the place where everything had begun. Outside of writing and speaking, Emily now ran Hope Haven, a nonprofit that trained homeless women in sewing, cooking, and financial literacy. Her mission was inspired by her own journey. A girl who once believed she wasn't enough, now helping dozens of women rediscover their worth. Nathaniel supported her fully, using Horizon Media's resources to grow her impact. But he always stood behind her, because he knew she was the heart of the mission. When the evening ended, Emily and Nathaniel stepped outside, beneath twinkling streetlights. The rain had stopped. Stars filled the sky. She leaned against him, warmth blooming in her chest, her book pressed to her side. The hug that saved 2 lives wasn't just a title, it was a reminder. That kindness ripples like water across a still lake, reaching farther than we ever imagined. Once, she had hugged a stranger in the rain. Now, every day, that stranger held her as if his whole life owed her everything. Emily looked up at Nathaniel, her husband, her partner, her home, and knew without doubt that this new life, the life she never had, was the one they had built together from a single act of light in the dark.